Hello, and welcome back to Digital Publishing Online, and I'm Lisa Gabrielle. And in this video, we're going to talk about preparing your page layouts for folding and working with setting up your InDesign documents so that you can achieve folding, a folding brochure. Okay. Over here, I have a handout on the screen, and I'm going to talk about the specifics of this handout, and I'm also going to make reference to your InDesign document. Okay. So in this handout, and I'm going to try and zoom up a little bit here so we can, and I'm going to open this up a little. Try not to cut myself off here. Okay. So what I have here on the screen is a diagram that I've drawn up, and this diagram is based on one of the folding systems that you might choose. It's not the only folding system that I recommend, and it's not the one you should choose because you should choose the folding system that works for your brochure. But it's the one I chose for this demonstration because it has all the perfect issues that I'd like to discuss with you. And this folding system that I'm going to discuss here is called a gatefold. Okay, what is a gatefold? Actually, um, I'll show you one here, a professional one that's done. So a gatefold folding system is a full brochure design that has a cover, and then you open up to a scenario that looks similar to this. They call this the gate. And then you open the gate or the barn door, and inside is all of the meat and potatoes of that brochure. Okay, so it's called a gatefold. Okay, and we are going to talk about gatefolds today as part of this lecture. So in this diagram here, you can kind of see I have drawn out for you a, um, a layout, a layout setup for a gatefold. And you can see that I have created a page in InDesign, and inside that page I have a what they call a bleed. And what a bleed is again, back to this example here, when you have graphics, photography, color, whatever in your brochure, and it prints all the way to the edge, like this example right here where these cashews are printing to the edge. This graphic field here of color and brown and green prints to the edge, and this photo up here also prints to the edge. That's what we call a bleed. And if I open it up, you'll notice that almost the entire brochure, including this panel here, is all including graphics that bleed to the edge. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to set up a bleed on your InDesign document, but it's important that you understand what one is, and that's where the information bleeds past the trim area. Okay. The other thing that I have on this diagram here is margins, for one. Those are located over here, page margins. And you should, at this point, know all about page margins from your previous assignment designing your book. And we're going to continue working with page margins. Uh, Brochures need to have page margins. Okay, those would be margins that take place outside of the print area. Okay, that would be, I'm kind of outlining it here. Those are your page margins. In addition to page margins on brochure design, you also have to think about margins inside each panel or page of your brochure. In the handout I gave you here, it refers to the individual panels of a brochure as a page, but I prefer to refer to them as panels. So that's how I'm going to refer to them in these lectures. So when I'm talking about, oops, when I'm talking about this here, I'm talking about panels, these individual areas right here, the sections of the brochure. And notice here, again, back to this example, okay? If I open up to the gate here, notice that the text has a margin around it. See, the text is not bleeding off to the edge. Okay, you can see that as well over here down this edge. Okay, That's what I'm talking about over and through here, is that for every panel in your brochure, you also have to have a series of margins, and that would include margins both on each side of the fold. So if I have a fold here, I also have, again, this is hard to see, a margin right here that gives me an idea of where I need to start my copy. Same thing over here in this panel. I guess if I fold it back like this would be easier to see. So here's this panel. You can kind of see that I've got a margin out here. I've got over here on this edge, I've got a margin as well. So on this diagram over here, this is indication of margins around your folds. Okay, that's these three areas. The other thing that you're seeing here on this diagram are fold marks. So when you prepare a brochure for a printer, which is probably what this would be prepared for, eventually a professional printer would print this, you have to indicate on your design where the folds are going to be. Otherwise, if you have no idea where the folds are going to be, then there's no way you can lay out your graphic content. So it's important that you have information about folds, and that information right here is indicated by a little tick mark or a fold line. Okay, and you'll be drawing these into your document. So up here, I give you a little bit of parameters about what you should set your line tool to when you create your fold lines and such, and we're going to kind of go through that when we get to the InDesign document. I also explain down here some of the things that you need to think about when setting up your folding system. Okay, like for instance, all of the things I just mentioned, the bleed, the fold lines, the margins, both inside and outside of the document, and also the final crop marks, which are actually not being shown on here, but I actually have a printout here that has crop marks on it. So if you haven't ever printed anything out that has crop marks, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this because this camera is not very good, but up here in the corner, there's a couple of lines that indicate where this document should be trimmed out. Again, you can kind of see here if I pull back, there's some crop marks in each corner of this design, both here, up here in the corner, and then over here in this corner. Those are called crop marks. Okay. And in one of my handouts, I actually have an example of crop marks, so we'll get to that eventually. All right. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and when we jump into our InDesign document, is that, and I'm pretty much a stickler about this, when you set up your document for this project, you'll be setting up one InDesign document with 2 pages. Okay. So make sure that you set your document up properly, because I definitely dock for stuff like that. If I tell you you need to set up your document as one document, 2 pages, and then you don't, I could dock points for that because I specifically asked you to set it up that way. In the real world, you get charged for things like that. So where I dock you points in the classroom, in the real world, you get charged for it. So I'm just trying to teach you the ways and methods of not incurring extra charges when working on a brochure project. Okay. All right. So now that you have this document here, this handout about how to prepare your document, we're going to jump into InDesign and look at that live. Okay. So back here, I have an example of a document that I've set up in InDesign. All right. And over here in the Pages menu, open that up so you can see that. You'll see I have one page set up for my front design and one page for my back design. So basically, what you're going to be doing here, back to the camera, all right, you're setting up a brochure that's going to have a front design and we'll call it inside design, or front and back, okay? Front and inside or back, okay? So both of these pages need to be set up in one document. All right, so let's jump back here. And that's what I have here. Now for this particular document, a couple things you need to think about, and I am going to be referring back to another handout that I've given you that I'm going to bring up here, called How to Calculate Trim Size of a Folded Piece. Okay, so let me explain what this means. All right. Now, a couple of things happen when you start designing brochures and working with folding systems. And one of the things that happens, and especially with a gatefold or any kind of piece that actually folds into itself. And what I mean by that is this let's pretend this is the cover or that's the cover. Let's pretend that's the cover. When I open this up, it has a gate. However, when I fold it, it folds into itself. I have to think about the sizes of these two panels, okay? Because if they're the wrong size, when I go to fold it inward, it's going to buckle and it's not going to look like it should look, and it'll actually be a mess. So it's important that you do a little math equation. We're going to talk about that based on this handout here, okay? Now, this happens in a gatefold scenario. This also is a problem when you're working with something like this, which this was my example I showed in the last video. This is called a typical trifold, and they call them in the industry, where you have a panel that's a cover like this, a front. You open it up and there's information here, and then it opens up and all of the meat and potatoes are on the inside. But this panel right here actually folds into the center of this one. So again, that same problem happens. Anytime you have a panel that folds into the brochure, you have to think about what size that panel is going to be. And typically, the size of that panel is going to be smaller than the other two panels. So basically, this front panel and this back panel are exactly the same. Okay, those are the same size. However, the panel that folds in is going to have to be slightly smaller. Okay, the same with a gatefold scenario. Okay, so you've got a front and a back, which are exactly the same. So again, just like the last example, if I fold it together, you'll see that these two panels right here, if I can go like this, okay? So these two panels need to be exactly the same so that when they fold together, they meet up and look perfect. Okay. However, when the brochure opens up, and these two panels that fold in, that's these two guys right here. All right, these two inside panels are going to need to be shorter because they fold into each other, and if they're not shorter, they're going to buckle and you'll end up with a mess. Okay, so basically this handout right here to the side here is explaining that dynamic.